Welcome, everyone. My name is Mary Eleanor Power, and I am the Director of Marketing Communications for Dalhousie University's Faculty of Open Learning and Career Development. And I am delighted to welcome Joel Levitt with us, who will be walking us through today's webinar focused on our certificate program in maintenance management. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. And I would like to share a bit of information on Joel just before I pass it over to him. So Joel is a leading trainer of maintenance professionals. He's conducted over 600 training sessions for more than 16,000 maintenance leaders from 3,000 organizations in more than 25 countries. And since 1980, he has been the president of Springfield Resources, a management consulting firm that services clients of all sizes on a wide range of maintenance issues. Those are a lot of numbers, Joel, and a lot of years that you have in this field. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Joel, and would also just like to remind everyone that if you do have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And I will obnoxiously jump in at different points to raise those questions to Joel. So Joel, over to you.
Well, thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Thanks.
I am not going to do what I was asked for a change. I will talk a little bit about the certificate program, but what I wanted to do was give you one actionable piece of intel from each of the three classes. So I'm not going to go over the complete curriculum unless you want me to, and I can do that. But I really wanted to give you a taste of some of the materials and some of the approaches that we take in this course. But it's three classes. Each of them is over 5 weeks. Each of them has readings, a textbook. Each of them has quizzes and finals, and a little bit of homework. And aside from the reading, some experiments to do, things like that. Let's see, I've spent a good deal of time in Canada, from the Maritimes out west to British Columbia, and view it kind of as a second home. So let's take a look at this. The first course is Introduction to Maintenance Management. Really there, I cover the wide gamut of things that are important to manage, to have maintenance work. Maintenance is the kind of thing where we're managing 1,000 details. And this is challenging because one detail missing would mean that something can't get fixed appropriately. So the first thing I want to talk about in this introduction was the issue of quality. We all, decry quality problems in products, and maintenance is no different. But traditionally, we would look to the worker for quality issues. And when we studied this particular thing about the worker and quality, we found that most of quality was outside the worker's hands. So my advice to people in the maintenance field is, if you're concerned about quality, what you want to do is fully plan your jobs and then schedule your jobs from what's called the ready backlog. The ready backlog is the backlog of jobs for which you've accounted for everything that you're going to need. So what that means directly is, first of all, do you have the right materials? I mean, this sounds trivial, but many times the maintenance department doesn't have the right materials or materials that fit. So they adapt and we call it improvisation, not the good kind on TV, but improvisation and maintenance, which is not only dangerous, but it's a challenge to quality, to improvise at the same quality. So we also want to make sure we have the right people doing the job. So the people have to have the skill sets. They have to be fit to work, fatigue, illness, prescription medications, not even illegal medications, but prescription medications like allergy drugs can affect performance. So fitness to work is really important. Supervision, is the supervisor presenting the job in a correct way that you can understand it, giving you complete information? Is the management, like sometimes management is so uptight about downtime costs that they breathe down the person's neck, trying to get them, they figure that if they keep interrupting the person, the job will go faster. It won't, and quality will suffer. The right tools, sometimes you see people that are, again, improvising with the wrong tools and working conditions. I spent some time in Fort McMurray. We had a warm snap. It was up at -30. And then we went back into the cold snap where it was -40. So, imagine trying to work on large equipment in those kind of conditions. And then finally, the right engineering. So what I wanted to say, if you're concerned about quality of work, what you want to do is you want to manage these things rather than, blaming workers. Try to manage the things that go into maintenance, and you'll find that the quality will naturally improve as you get the right tools, you make sure the right parts are available, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the discussions we have in the first course, the Introduction to Maintenance Management. And it's an important discussion because it relates to the next course, which is planning and scheduling. Now, planning and scheduling is the way we ensure, I just mentioned quality, but we also ensure a certain amount of efficiency. So we did a study in heavy maintenance, and it showed that a typical maintenance worker spent about 32% of their time with tools on the machine or in direct diagnostics, and 68% on what we call indirect activities. That's activities that are, not productive, marginally productive, etc. Now, the deal with these indirect activities is that they're forced by your company. You force your employees, your maintenance people, to work in less than productive ways. Let me give you an example. One of the biggest barriers to productive work is the whole issue around the supply of spare parts. In some places, I write up a work order in SAP or in some system, Maximo or whatever, upkeep. And the picking list goes to the warehouse and they pick the job, and then they kit it for the maintenance worker when they're ready. In other places, you go to the warehouse window and you shoot the breeze about, probably you guys will be hockey. And eventually you tell them what you need and you get it in time, but it might be 15 minutes, it might be 45 minutes. You then go to your job, and you now have the parts, and the equipment has not been locked out, it's not been cleaned, it's not been decontaminated, because nobody really was, ahead of the game on that. So now you have to wait for people to come. All this is where that 68% of indirect comes from. Now, some of it is very closely tied up in how we do maintenance. So it's hard to impact. But I'm going to tell you frankly that a lot of the barriers, a lot of the things that are in that 68% are just plain stupid. They're wastes of time. And they grew up that way because of something sometime in the past. And no one has rethought that function. So, for example, in a sawmill, I found that it was virtually impossible to return parts that were surplus to a particular job. In other words, the paperwork burden was bad. And so, maintenance people are smart. They figured that if it's going to be so complicated, they're not going to return the parts. They're going to either scrap them or throw them in a bin, throw them in their toolbox, or what we call the rat's nest stores, which are hidden areas around the plant where maintenance people hide stuff that they can't return, but they might want to use sometime in the future. So these barriers are a lot of times, we have this concept of the normalization of deviance. In other words, where something that's not right persists for a while and then it starts to normalize or become normal looking. And these barriers are that way. So you walk around, you don't see barriers. What you see is people doing the prescribed activity, like trying to enter a work order. One was a good example, was the company made a big move towards work orders and really wanted everybody to fill out the work orders and did training and all the right things. But they had one entry point on the shop floor. The rest of them were in the offices. So there was one computer on the shop floor for entering work orders. So people would keep their eye on that station and wouldn't enter their work orders until it was open. But sometimes they would, hang out and talk about it, and then sometimes they would forget, and it kind of defeated the purpose. So the important thing is, before we start formally planning and scheduling, I usually take a walk around and look for some of these stupid barriers that interfere with the maintenance and don't add any value to the process. So that's the key thing. They add no value, but they do interfere with the maintenance person's natural ability to do the work. So fix them. Some of them are real easy. Some of them you may have to work with to fix, but fix the ones that are easily fixable, and you'll find it's easier to do the work. Now, the third course is preventive and predictive maintenance. And we spend in the maintenance world, those of you in the maintenance world know, we spend a lot of effort trying to manage breakdowns, and preventive and predictive maintenance is the primary way we do that. There's all kinds of ways of coming up with PMs. There's very rigorous ways like reliability center maintenance. There's informal ways like, yeah, we should check the bearings. We should check this. We should check that. We should do this, do that. Probably most PMs are that more informal. But in your bigger companies that, that have more money, time, engineering, they may do very, sophisticated choosing of the tasking. But here's the problem. Only 25% of the breakdowns are due to wear and tear. In other words, most breakdowns that we experience are typically due to some kind of carelessness. Now, I want you to just think about this. If you're in maintenance, you know we spend a lot of time talking, training, exchanging files over effective PM. And it's a major area of concentration for people. Yet it only addresses 1 in 4 of the potential breakdowns. So in some ways, that's insane, right? What I'm suggesting is maybe we should start to look at carelessness of all kinds. You know, there's carelessness in the maintenance area, you know, maintenance workers that work quickly. I was a service person for a system company in the oil business, and I've certainly caused problems from my own carelessness. That's, you know, it's kind of like that's how you get to be good at something, to be, you know, not good judgment. So everybody who's ever carried tools, you know, if they're any good at it, have made mistakes and were careless. So we can address that. We can address carelessness in operations. We can address carelessness in the warehouse for the spares, or in engineering, or in raw materials, whatever it is. It could be that some application in the area of carelessness might be the ticket to higher reliability, in addition to our preventive and predictive program, which will work better if we've dealt with the carelessness ahead of time. So that was the one idea from preventive and predictive maintenance. And that's why the certificate is such a good idea. So I want to turn it back to you and Mary Ellen, and any questions or any comments or anything. I'm sorry I didn't do what you promised that I would do.
Oh my goodness, no, I think you absolutely did, in that you provided an overview and some examples, and walk people through what they can expect from the program itself. I wonder, Joel, and I'll certainly encourage anyone to flag some questions in the chat here, but would love to know a little bit more, Joel, about your personal experience in mitigating that carelessness that you talked about. You know, I think no matter what role you're in, and certainly even in marketing, where we're not kind of managing things or managing equipment per se, and kind of labor intensive and using our hands in a lot of things, we still talk a lot about systems and processes and predictability, to avoid such things as carelessness, or you know, and to make sure everyone is on the same page. What has been your recipe for success in managing some of that carelessness?
Well, first of all, you know, the issue with carelessness, again, you have to go back to what is driving it in some cases. In some cases, like in the place that was sawmill for dimensional lumber, production requirements were pressing on the operators to move as quickly as possible. So they were taking trunks with their grabber and throwing them onto the line that would debark the tree trunk. And they would trash the grabber every couple of weeks. And it was like, well, yeah, if you act like that, you're going to trash the equipment every couple of weeks. And the, you know, the carelessness was not somebody like traditionally being careless. It was somebody being pressured to do more work than the equipment was designed to handle. So that's one thing I would say.
Mm.
When I say carelessness, I don't want it to be a blame conversation.
Mm.
I want it to be, hey, maybe somebody was working 12 hours and then they
Mm.
just blew it, you
Right.
know? Or in my case, my worst thing that I did was I was out at the tip of Long Island, sort of visualize that. Long Island is as far from Philadelphia, where I live, as it is from New York City. Like it's farther from Long Island to New York than it is from New York to Philadelphia. And it was a Friday afternoon, and I knew that if I got on the road later than 2 p.m., I wouldn't get home till 9 because of traffic.
Right. Right. Right.
But if I
Right.
could slip in there around 2, I could get home at 6. So I was like really jazzed up, and I was not careful with putting um, the lid on something and literally shorted all the electronics out.
Oh no.
Nearly all the circuit boards fried. That was, I got out at 2 o'clock, but I had to go back the next week and fix
Wow.
everything.
Um, yeah, no, I think it's really important that you highlight, that it's not about blame. It's about some of the other pressurizing factors that go into some of that carelessness. And we do have a question here just in the chat around the program, and just wondering if you can elaborate on this, Joel. Do you need a background in process improvement for this program?
Well, a background in process improvement is always going to be helpful, obviously. What we find is we don't even have to go to that level to find the problems. A lot of it has to do with just common sense, just like basics, like having a checklist when you set up a machine. Like a really simple checklist will eliminate, a bunch of small, low impact but high probability events. And it would be great if you worked in process improvement, but if you just followed some basic stuff. I mean, I'm not an expert in a lot of this real fancy stuff. People that set this kind of thing up, I mean, I have a degree in computer science, but um, there's tons of people that know more than me about all that stuff. But I found I was always strongest in the obvious stuff that was missing. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if that makes sense to you.
Mm-hmm. And well, and sometimes it's the obvious things that get overlooked. Um, and I'm wondering, Joel, maybe you can just elaborate for me, who would get the most value out of this certificate and the courses? In what roles? Maybe you can elaborate that on that a little bit.
We've had some really great people through the program. Um, and the people that got the most benefit were people that were on the move and were looking for stepping stones to get to a next level for themselves. And I'm talking about people from everywhere, from some of your refineries to wood products companies to even Border Patrol. We had a number of people from Border Patrol take the course, and they figured out some things to simplify their job and make things more reliable that they were very happy about. And I always get emails from people who took the course and got an advancement that they were thinking about or looking at and felt that they were prepared at this point. And that was really, that's very edifying to know that I prepared someone for something that they wanted to, get to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, I want to get to this question in the Q&A. It's kind of it's an interesting one, but that common sense that you talk about, someone just anonymously asked, can you teach common sense? Can you teach that common sense that you talked about?
I don't know, man.
You can try.
Well, I think you can demonstrate it.
Right.
And some people will, as they gain experience in a field, they'll realize it. You know, it's really interesting in the electrical field. There's you know, very sophisticated things can go wrong, obviously. But if you're called to troubleshoot a system, the first thing you check once you're experienced is you check if it's plugged in, right?
Mm.
And anybody that's been in the electrical field has done troubleshooting on a piece of equipment that wasn't plugged in, and finally realized that there was no electricity. And it, you know, you're smiling, and I laughed because, you know, I had at home, I had a vacuum cleaner that I couldn't get to work, and I had plugged it in and everything. I was like well ahead of the curve, and I like took it apart and I took my meter and everything, and I traced it up to an on-off switch that was off. Flick the switch on, the vacuum cleaner works off. So that's what I'm talking about, common sense, where I wasn't born with it. I was the kind of person that you had to beat me over the head with a 2x4 a couple times before I would start to do the easy thing first.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes that's, yeah, it takes someone providing those examples to kind of get it into, to let it sink in a little bit. I want to go back to, and thanks so much for that question. That's a great one. I just want to go back to actually the title of this webinar and kind of wrap up with a question around kind of today's COVID pandemic recovery ongoing. It seems like we're back and forth. Are we recovering? Are we not? But that being said, the title of this webinar is, you know, save headaches, time, and money. And I just wonder if you can kind of speak to the importance and the added importance of those factors in today's world, wherever we are, you know, in kind of managing the pandemic and businesses managing this new normal. And very much a cliche word, but wonder if you can speak to that a little bit around maintenance management. And
well, in one way, I'm not qualified to speak about that because I haven't gone outside yet.
right.
So I don't know, like my clients all over the world, I talk to them still,
Yeah.
and they're in deep doo-doo because the skill, the dearth of skills that was developing before COVID has become acute, like all-encompassing problem, because there's, you know, a lot of workers just left the industry, and a lot of skills are now virtually, I mean, really hard to find. So it's incumbent upon us to, you know, do the things we can do to make it easier to do the work and be more effective. You know, if a crew is doing 32% on tools, you know, if we could get them to 50%, I mean, not even crazy numbers, just like a little better, then we would have a much better shot at doing what we're supposed to do each day. There's a Japanese concept called muda, M-U-D-A, which is waste, just the whole issue of waste. And that's what I'd like to have people, you know, try to deal with their wastes so that the people that are there can work more effectively, and they'll feel better about the work.
Right, exactly. And just one final question, just to wrap us up. I know we're at our time here, but is any aspect of maintenance possible to do virtually if you have another set of hands at the other end?
Well, there's a move to make that, like, use augmented reality for complex maintenance procedures. And I think that's a great idea. It's just very expensive to develop because you have to develop it for each repair on each asset. And that's a big number.
Mm.
The only people that can afford to develop it, I've seen demonstrations from, like, BMW.
Mm.
They can afford to develop a repair, a augmented reality, because there's 50,000 workers around the world fixing BMWs.
Right.
I think that this is going to be, I mean, it's happening in surgery, so you would have to expect that it will get it after the price comes down.
Mm. Right, exactly. Yeah. And more people use it. So I'm mindful of our time, but I do want to just wrap us up for today. And thank you so much, Joel, for walking us through today's webinar and sharing with us some information about the program. I did include a link to the certificate earlier in the chat. So please, I would encourage you to check it out. Before the end of our workday, we are in Nova Scotia, so Atlantic time. Before the end of our workday, we will be sending out an email to all of you who attended, as well as to all of our registrants who might not have been able to join us, with a recording of today's webinar and a link to the certificate so you can find out more. And thanks so much again, Joel. Thanks everyone very much for joining us. And take care and stay safe.
Thanks, Mary Eleanor.
Thank you.
Great meeting you.
Great meeting you too. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.